Hey everyone, I'm Jessica, and it has been a while. I have been playing so many solo games, but it is time to talk about them some more. Finally! So, I am going to start with an interesting game that I stumbled across, and that is Arborea. My husband was just over here trying to make me pronounce it incorrectly, so let's just hope that's right. But this is a beautiful game that has a really striking visual appearance with its board and its many different types of pieces and the cards. And what you're doing is you're sort of a spirit that's bringing the world back to life, and you're traveling down these paths, deciding when to move along a track and stop, and then go down a path for bonuses. So if you wait longer, you obviously get better stuff, but sometimes it pays to go earlier. And it's a really neat game with a lot of different mechanisms in it that I thought was going to be a lot. When I first saw this and picked it up, I was like, all right, I'm going to have to sit down. This is going to take a while to really understand. And it's actually, for me at least, it's not as heavy as I thought it was going to be. It's not as complex. There's a lot going on. I will give it that, absolutely. I did struggle with the rulebook a little bit. I don't think it was laid out in a way that really clicked for me as much as I would have hoped for. There's not too much to how to play your turn. There's a lot of strategy and a lot of decisions. But getting to that point, I was like, oh, well, that's all I'm doing? That's not too bad. But there are different creatures that you need to attract to the area and then actually bring into your area to put them in this environment, an ecosystem that you're sort of creating from these cards and completing different things. And the other neat mechanism that you have is this sort of resource sharing. So on your turn, in solo as well as multiplayer, you will create resources which you might want to use that turn, which is great. But if you don't, you can leave them there for someone else to use, which is the solo opponent in my case. Or if you don't, again, if you leave it for that solo opponent to use, you gain points immediately for it, which could actually be beneficial to you if you're like, I'm not going to be able to use this. That probably makes more sense. Or you can also keep an eye out and be like, the solo opponent does not need this right now, so I can gain something for those resources, and maybe I'll be able to use them later on. It's a really neat way to sort of simulate sharing in a game where you actually get a benefit from that. And it's just a very neat way to sort of track that on with these neat pieces that sort of have a lower level and then a top, and you'll sort of move them either up or down depending on whether you're using those resources. I thought it was a really, really neat way to bring in all of these elements and all these choices. It is very busy, I will give it that. A lot of other comments and other videos I've seen do mention how the board is busy in terms of the artwork and the graphic design. I didn't find that this was too much of an issue for me, but I can absolutely understand if that's going to be, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of icons that are kind of small. For solo, I was able to keep the board in front of me, but playing with other people, I can understand how that might be a little bit of a challenge to, see everything and understand what you're trying to do and making those decisions about traveling down these tracks, moving them, and when you want to step off onto a path. But I was really surprised by this one. I really liked it. And looking at some of the, my pros and cons that I actually wrote down this time. I really liked the artwork, which is bright and whimsical, not just on the board, but on everything else. It just looks really striking, very unique, and is just kind of a joy to look at, just with all of these colors. Sometimes you see a muted color palette, but the box should tell you, it's not really muted here. You're going to get a lot of bright colors in there. I didn't find it, again, too complex to play through. There's a lot of moving parts, so this isn't like something that you pick up and you're like, it's easy, I know what I'm doing. I had no idea what I was doing half the time, but I was having fun piecing it together. And then making those decisions about when to get off of those tracks and which trail or path to go on, making those decisions about where am I going to get the best bonus, and did I give a gift to I believe they're the spirits that are sort of the main ones in this area, did I give them gifts so that I get extra benefits? Does it make sense to go there? Or maybe it makes sense to go on this other path or trail. There was not a dominant strategy either. I haven't played that many times, but there's not a path to victory that's guaranteed. I keep finding new things to try out. Some games I have had a lot of creatures, and that's been, a big focus on like filling up my ecosystem. Other times there's just been a couple of creatures, and I am finding other ways to gain points, often through that shared resource pool, which is really, really cool. And one thing that I will mention, which I don't know if anybody has noticed or even cares about, but I was like, whoa, that's actually neat. If you look at the board very, very closely, there are these cardboard pieces, kind of tiles that go on the tracks, and these slide, and you'll kind of move them around as they get to an end of a track, and it goes back around. Mostly because there's these season bonuses that you can put your meeple on and move along. But the cool thing about this, as I was playing, I noticed as I'm sliding these along, I'm like, these are actually, staying pretty straight on the board. And this is a flat board. This is not a dual layered board. And I'm like, how is it staying that straight? Like, I'm not that good at this. I usually just in my play area, I need to make it look good. But then I looked at it, and it looks like they actually used something like Spot UV to actually outline that area. And that has created sort of this just very, very slight ridge that keeps that piece or those pieces in place. And I was like, that's pretty cool. It's a very, very small detail, but, I like small details and finding these things that are, nobody probably cares about them, but I like discovering this sort of hidden, fun little features. So well done on that board. And then I also found that even though there's a lot of things going on, I had to think about a lot of stuff as I'm going through this. It moved pretty quickly. This didn't, when I looked at this on Board Game Geek, I said to myself, all right, that's a highly complex game. I'm probably going to be playing this for several hours. And it moved much quicker than I expected, which was nice, to get through a game and have a nice experience. It did not drag on. I felt like there was a lot of good stuff going on with it. In the con department, or the negatives, I definitely did not, the rulebook just did not work for me. And that may be something that's very subjective, and it probably is. Not everybody will mesh with every rulebook out there. This one just really, I think it complicated things. It made me confused at times. And it wasn't until I started playing that I said, oh, I get what that means. I figured that out finally. And then I think even though I finally grasped those rules, figuring out the optimal strategies and what to do was a little tricky at first. I really had no idea what I was doing. To this day, I probably still do not know what I'm doing. It is fun though, but figuring out what is the best choice was a little overwhelming at times. I also, for solo, there are score multipliers for the solo opponent, which sort of give you the difficulty levels. I'm not a big fan of this because I will often just play and figure out what scoring tier I beat with that multiplier, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to play with the maximum difficulty with that scoring multiplier. It would have been nice if it did a little bit more and added more of a challenge to what I was doing, put more constraints on my choices a little bit. Not the end of the world. It wasn't, I did not like it. But I think that was something that I was like, yeah, not my favorite way to have a solo opponent. And then finally, I had a couple of weird issues with some of the components. Some of my wooden creatures that are screen printed, so they have, the artwork on the wooden piece, and some of those are just, nope, did not it did not match up. And also I got the retail edition, which unfortunately the rulebook mentions all of the special expansion stuff and the deluxe edition and all these components, which I don't have. So it was kind of I didn't realize that I had purchased a retail edition of the box that didn't have the deluxe. So seeing that in the rulebook, I was like, okay, and I can't pick up all of the stuff for it. So I'm fine. I will just stick with what I have. But that was pretty much everything about Arborea. Let's hope I got the name right. I really enjoyed it. It had a couple of rough edges here and there, especially with the learning process, but it is a beautiful game and I feel like it's very unique. I don't think that it really ticked all of the same boxes as other solo games in my collection. Could it be better in some ways? Sure, but it really is a nice game to look at on the table with all of those bright colors, the components. It is beautiful and very different. So I am looking forward to playing this one again and playing to actually win, hopefully, against one of the higher scoring multipliers for the solo opponent. We will see, though. I'm good near the lower levels at this point. We will still call that a victory. So that again is Arborea. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you get some cool solo games to your table soon. Thanks. Bye.